All right, we're going to look at the female reproductive organs. These are the organs that are responsible for producing sex hormones and ova, or eggs. The female reproductive organs function to protect and support a developing embryo, and the main organs include the uterus, ovaries, fallopian tubes, and vagina. The uterus is a pear-shaped muscular organ located in the anterior portion of the pelvis between the bladder and the rectum. It is divided into body and cervix. The body is the upper 2/3 of the uterus. Rounded superior portion is called the fundus. The lateral borders of the fundus are called the cornula. This is where they adjoin with the fallopian tubes. The fallopian tubes then extend out into the adnexal regions. The bottom 1/3 of the uterus is narrow. This is often known as the cervix. It does connect with the vagina. The narrow lumen inside the cervix is also known as the cervical canal. The uterus is composed of 3 layers, the perimetrium, myometrium, and the innermost layer, the endometrium, which is the layer that is shed each month with menstruation. I simply put some color blocks over the uterus just to break this down into body and cervical region. As you can see, it's not exact science, but basically the large bulbing part is going to be fundus. This is body, and this will be the cervix region. The ligaments of the uterus are used to stabilize the uterus in place to help it keep from moving around. There are essentially 3 ligaments that we will talk about. One is the round ligament. It extends laterally from the cornea and through the inguinal canal to the labia. This helps keep the uterus in an anteverted position or leaning forwards. The next uterine ligament is known as the uterosacral ligament. It extends from the lateral walls of the cervix to the anterior surface of the sacrum, preventing forward movement. So this essentially stabilizes the cervix in that middle portion and disallows it from moving more anterior or posterior, which is also bordered by bladder and rectum. Then we have lateral cervical ligaments. These extend like a fan from the lateral walls of the cervix and vagina to the fascias of the wall of the true pelvis. This helps keep the uterus suspended above the bladder and from pushing down on it too much. There are 2 ovaries. They are almond-shaped ovaries located on either side of the uterus. These are responsible for the production of eggs, estrogen, and progesterone. They do lie in the depression of the pelvic walls and are held in place by ligaments. 2 to be exact. There's an ovarian ligament and a suspensory ligament. The ovarian ligament attaches to the inferior aspect and the lateral wall of the uterus, and the suspensory attaches to the superior aspect of the ovary and to the lateral wall of the pelvis. This also allows the ovaries from free-floating in those adnexal spaces, which oftentimes have peristalsing bowels, so it would be very easy to move a almond-shaped structure around if it was not suspended by those ligaments. So here's a couple of pictures just showing us ovaries. The thing with ovaries is if you look for speckled or spotted areas, that often helps. If you look right here in the middle of the structure, I'm going to go ahead and circle this here. There's ovary. So that ovary, you can see there's follicles on there, and we're seeing that same thing right in this location on this side. Those spots tell us that that's ovary. We also can look for these ligaments that are attaching there to uterus. Most of the time, ovaries are next to the uterine body, but they have been known to be found out here further in the adnexa. As you get scanning these more, you will find that they do become a little bit more difficult to find on imaging studies. They're easier on CT and MRs than they are on ultrasounds. Next, we have uterine tubes. These are the same thing as fallopian tubes. They are slender muscular tubes, about 8 to 20 centimeters long. They extend from that body of the uterus to the perineum near the ovaries. To the peritoneum near the ovaries. and they are supported by the broad ligament. The distal end is a funnel-shaped area called the infundibulum with finger-like projections that spread out around the ovary. Those finger-like projections are known as fembrae, and they essentially scoop up any of the eggs that are expelled from that ovary. The vagina is a 10 to 10 centimeter long muscular tube extending from the cervix to the vaginal orifice. It is located between the bladder and the rectum. If we look at the female reproductive organs, this cartoon diagram pretty much sums it all up, but we essentially have vagina, cervical region with the external and internal os. All of this is uterus. This location right here is the cornea, and here's my fallopian tubes out here that surround ovaries. Notice how my fallopian tubes out there are not attached to those ovaries. They do not attach directly to them. Those finger-like projections kind of wrap around a portion of the ovaries, but they do not enclose them. This is how we can get ectopic pregnancies, because if an egg is expelled from this part of the ovary and it's not swept up into this tube, it will implant in anything that's out here in the adnexa, and therefore we have a ectopic pregnancy that can happen. The broad ligament is a peritoneal fold. It does enclose the ovaries, uterine tubes, and the uterus. They're kind of like bat wings is what I like to think of it, like a cape that's on Batman. As you extend arms, which are these fallopian tubes out, we have these broad ligaments that are attached there. This does help stabilize all of those organs and keep them from moving side to side. All right, we do have some pelvic spaces. These are going to be located in actually both genders, but specifically we'll look at the rectouterine pouch that's known as the pouch of Douglas. This is located between the uterus and the rectum. We also have something known as the vesicouterine pouch. It is located between the uterus and the posterior wall of the bladder. There is also known as the retropubic space between the pubic bone and bladder. That rectopubic space is going to be right in this location. And rectouterine space is going to be here. That's the pouch of Douglas. Keep in mind the rectouterine space is going to be named something different in a male because we don't have a uterus there. So in a male, it's going to be rectovesical. The vesicouterine space is going to be here. All right, well, last thing we're going to do is look at a scan of a female pelvis. We're going to start in a sagittal cut. If you look closely, we can see vagina and rectum. And if I scan just a little bit off to the side, we get a better picture of that. So here's sigmoid colon with rectum, and here's vagina right next to it. Notice uterus is not there anymore because we're a little bit off axis, which just means this person's uterus is not sitting smack dab in the middle of their body. No problem. As I continue to scan, start looking to see if you can find ovary. Does anyone see it? Right here is ovary. You'll look for the little polka dots here. As I move through there, you'll see it. This ovary sits up a little bit high, but as you can see, it sits there beautifully. As I come back down and I go through midline again, so there's uterus, beautiful uterus with the 3 layers of the uterus are located there. You can see the echogenic endometrium. This is bladder, if you're wondering what the structure here is. So remember bladder, vagina, rectum. As I scan through, start looking for left ovary, and we can see it right there in the middle. Right here's a beautiful almond-shaped ovary. You can see that in this picture. Good. I'm going to come up here and I'm going to switch over to a axial cross-section just so we can see as I'm scanning through. Right here we have bladder, vagina, rectum. I have hips with acetabulum, so I know that that's my ball and socket. Okay, so I'm going to scan up, and as I scan up, I now get more of uterine body. I also have an ovary that has appeared here. And remember, the one ovary was up really high, so we're going to go above uterus, and here's my other ovary in this picture. And then I'm up into bowel. But you can see how low that uterus sits. It's going to be below that iliac crest region. When you're scanning by ultrasound, you've probably noticed, but you have to actually scan really low. You're going to be down on a person's pubic bone. This is just a different weighting mechanism. So you can see it makes it a little harder to see ovaries in a T1. If you look, it's difficult to find. This is actually ovary here and ovary here, but we lose like those follicles on it when we're in a different weighted MRI. Which spots?